The US and Canada are two massive neighbors, but what if that border wasn't so permanent? What if certain states, frustrated with Washington's politics or attracted to Canada's stability, actually broke away? It might sound unlikely, but the truth is that some states already have deep economic, cultural, and even political ties to Canada. Think about it. What if Vermont embraced its independent spirit and separated? What if Minnesota's northern character felt more at home in Canada? And Alaska, already disconnected from the mainland, what then? Some of these might come as a surprise, but in other cases, the signs are already there. Let's take a closer look. Number 10. Vermont. What if an entire state already felt more like Canada than the US? You might think of maple syrup, small towns, and crisp autumn air. Exactly the kind of things that make Vermont a potential candidate for separation. This state has a history of independence, once existing as its own republic before joining the Union in 1791. Politically, Vermont leans heavily toward progressive policies, similar to its northern neighbor. Interestingly, some residents already support separation. A movement called the Second Vermont Republic has pushed for secession for years, arguing the state would do better on its own, with strong trade ties to Quebec, shared interest in social programs, and an economy that aligns closely with Canada's. The idea of Vermont leaving doesn't seem so far-fetched. Could it be the first real secession in America in centuries? Number 9. Maine. You might be surprised to learn that one U.S. state already depends heavily on Canada, so much so that it would struggle without it. Maine imports a large portion of its electricity from Quebec and relies on cross-border trade. In fact, over $3 billion in goods move between Maine and Canada each year. Culturally, Maine already feels more Canadian than American, with its rugged coastlines, tight-knit fishing towns, and French-speaking communities. It shares more in common with New Brunswick than with a state like Texas. Even politically, Maine often aligns more closely with Canada's policies than Washington's. And it's worth noting, Maine was once part of Massachusetts until it split off in 1820. It separated once. Could it happen again? Number 8. New Hampshire. What if a state decided it no longer needed the U.S.? New Hampshire has a long tradition of resisting federal control, opposing high taxes, and valuing personal freedom. In 2022, a group of lawmakers even proposed an amendment to the state constitution to allow voters to consider secession. It didn't pass, but the fact that it was seriously discussed is significant. New Hampshire stands out. There's no income tax, no sales tax, and a live free or die mentality. In some ways, this mindset is closer to Canada's decentralized government than Washington's federal model. Its economy is also closely tied to Canada, with over $8 billion in trade annually. Many businesses in the state rely on Canadian partnerships. Culturally, New Hampshire has more in common with its northern neighbor than states like California or Florida. It's a small, rural state with a strong outdoor culture, a love for winter sports, and a unique regional identity. And don't forget, New Hampshire has been a base for political activism before. The Free State Project, a movement encouraging libertarians to move there and promote limited government, has already had an impact. What if the next step wasn't just resisting federal policies, but leaving the U.S. entirely? It may sound extreme, but in a state where independence is a core value, it's not out of the question. Possible. Number 7. Minnesota. You might be surprised to learn that one U.S. state is already so connected to Canada that leaving America could actually seem reasonable. It has strong economic ties, a shared culture, and a population that, at times, is even mistaken for being Canadian. That state is Minnesota. Let's take a closer look. Minnesota shares nearly a 550-mile border with Canada, and its largest trading partner is, yes, Canada. In 2023 alone, Minnesota exported over $7 billion worth of goods across the border, making Canada essential to the state's economy. But it's not just about economics. Minnesota and Canada have similar lifestyles. The people are friendly, enjoy outdoor activities, and are known for their distinct accents and passion for hockey. The weather is also extremely cold, much like Canada's. Politically, the state often aligns more with progressive Canadian policies than with more conservative American ones. There's also historical context. Before Minnesota officially became a U.S. state in 1858, parts of it were under British control, and its fur trade was heavily tied to Canada. Even today, many Minnesotans have dual citizenship or close family ties with Canadians just across the border. Some experts believe that if the U.S. ever faced political or economic difficulties, Minnesota might be one of the first states to consider alternatives. With its deep connections to Canada, it wouldn't be surprising if some residents began looking north rather than west. Number 6. North Dakota. What if an entire state relied more on a foreign country than its own government? It may sound unlikely, but North Dakota is in that very position. It might seem like a quiet, overlooked part of the U.S., but its economy is closely linked to Canada. North Dakota exports more goods to Canada than to any other country, about $6 billion annually. And it goes beyond trade. Canada provides a large portion of the state's energy. In agriculture, North Dakota farmers depend on Canadian buyers to keep their businesses going. Even in daily life, many residents regularly cross the border for healthcare, shopping, or work. In some towns, it's common to see just as many Canadian license plates as American ones. Politically, North Dakota's small government, pro-business approach often matches the views of Canada's western provinces, especially Alberta, more than Washington, D.C. There is even a historical example. At one time, there were serious talks about North Dakota and Manitoba forming a shared economic zone. It didn't happen, but the idea hasn't completely disappeared. So, what if the U.S. faced a crisis? North Dakota's close ties to Canada raise the question, could the state one day consider formalizing that connection? Number 5. Montana. What if a state had more in common with Canada than with the rest of the U.S.? What if its independent, rugged spirit led it to question whether remaining in America was the right choice? That's the case with Montana. Montana already functions in many ways like a Canadian province. It shares a 545-mile border with Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. But these provinces are more than just neighbors, they're economic partners. In 2023, Montana exported over $700 million in goods to Canada, making Canada one of its top trade partners. Culturally, the people of Montana share a strong connection to nature, ranching, hunting, and enduring tough winters. Much like their Canadian neighbors historically, Montana has had closer connections to Canada than to other parts of the U.S. Back in the 1800s, before it officially became a state, much of Montana's fur trade was dominated by Canadian companies. Even today, many Montanans have dual citizenship or close family ties across the border. Some even joke that Alberta and Montana are basically the same place, except one has universal healthcare. Here's the part few people talk about: Montana is home to strong anti-federal government sentiment. Many Montanans believe Washington ignores them, and some would prefer to be part of a system that better matches their values and economy. If things ever got bad enough, who's to say Montana wouldn't look north instead of east? Before we continue, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep bringing you content filled with surprising facts and possibilities. And trust me, you won't believe what's next. What if a state felt more connected to its northern neighbor than to its own country? What if its largest city was already financially, politically, and culturally tied to Canada? Washington may be known for its tech industry and coffee culture, but beneath the surface, something is shifting, something that could change its future forever. Number 4. Washington. Why does this state feel more connected to its northern neighbor than to the rest of the U.S.? Why are its largest cities already financially, politically, and culturally linked to another nation? Washington isn't just near Canada, it's deeply connected in ways that raise questions about where its future may lead. Could a shift be more likely than people think? The answer might surprise you. Let's look at the numbers. Washington's number one trading partner is Canada. In 2023 alone, over $20 billion in goods were exchanged between them. That's not just a small amount, that's a major economic relationship. And it's not just trade. Washington depends on Canadian energy, with large amounts of hydroelectric power flowing south from British Columbia. Even Seattle, Washington's biggest port, is heavily connected to Canadian shipping routes, moving millions of dollars in goods between Asia and North America, but it goes further than economics. Washington is also politically aligned with Canada. It's one of the most progressive states in the U.S., with policies on healthcare, environmental protection, and social services that often resemble Canadian approaches more than American ones. Washington has also advocated for closer ties with British Columbia, including proposals for high-speed rail linking Seattle and Vancouver in under 2 hours. Some politicians have even discussed deeper economic cooperation, and the cultural connections are just as clear. From Vancouver to Seattle, people share a love for the outdoors, a tech-driven economy, and an enthusiasm for coffee. Many British Columbians live and work in Washington but still call Canada home. If the U.S. ever faced a major political divide, it wouldn't be surprising if Washington began looking north instead of east. Number 3. Oregon. What if a state felt so disconnected from the rest of the country that it began exploring other options? What if its people, culture, and economy were more in line with another country? That's the situation developing in Oregon, and the trend is more serious than many realize. Let's start with the economy. Oregon relies heavily on trade with Canada, moving over $4 billion in goods every year. But here's the surprising part: Oregon's environmental and social policies are more similar to British Columbia's than to its U.S. neighbors. Its positions on healthcare, sustainability, and labor rights resemble Canadian approaches more than American ones. Some Oregonians are already expressing a desire for change. You may have heard of the Greater Idaho Movement, where some rural counties want to leave Oregon and join Idaho. But here's another idea. Some residents argue that Western Oregon would be better off joining Canada. It might sound extreme, but when a state repeatedly disagrees with the federal government, at what point do people begin looking for a system that fits their values? And don't forget geography. Portland and Vancouver, Canada, not Washington, are very similar. From outdoor lifestyles to progressive politics, the two cities feel more connected to each other than Portland does to places like Texas or Florida. So, if a major crisis ever caused states to reconsider their affiliations, don't be surprised if Oregon started looking north instead of south. Before we continue, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep bringing you content full of surprising facts and possibilities.